Welcome back to the Shared Practices podcast. I'm Caitlin Embree, and I am so excited to have back with us today Dr. Timm. She has been on our podcast before, many years ago. If you go back to the archives, we interviewed her last when she was owning, at the time, 3 practices, and she's had some really cool changes in her journey since then. And I thought it was a perfect time to kind of bring her back on and get to know her again and kind of touch base. So welcome, Dr. Timm.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great intro.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, catch us up. Maybe for those of us who haven't heard your first episode, like I said, it's been a long time. Kind of go back to the beginning, talk through your journey of becoming a dentist and where you started with practice ownership, kind of where you are now, and then we're going to do a deep dive.
Yeah, perfect. So the details sometimes are murky to me. I'm not super detail oriented in terms of dates and years and things like that. So
Sure.
please jump in and correct me just because it's such a blur. It feels like I've lived a lifetime in
Right.
a split second. But anyways, so I graduated from the University of Iowa in 2018, which once again sounds like a lifetime ago, but also wasn't all that long ago. But I wanted to move back to my hometown in rural Iowa. And it just so happened that I found out my 4th year that a practice was coming up for sale in my hometown. Just to cut out all the long story of it, it was a husband and wife who owned this practice. And because they were 2 doctors, they had a second location too. So kind of their contingency was that I had to buy both locations if I wanted the one in Williamsburg. They weren't really going to split it up for us. So he had a stroke. So she was running them as 2 part-time offices. So Williamsburg was a 2-day-a-week office. Sigourney was a 2-day-a-week office. So it added up to 1 full-time office. The staff, everything traveled. So I took that on. So in a sense, I did immediately jump into multi-practice ownership, but I was a single doctor and just bounced between locations. So it was kind of a hybrid of 1 office and 2 offices. It's kind of the best way to describe it. But we grew pretty quickly, as I think a lot of people who buy from retiring dentists find. There's just a lot of growth opportunities there. So I did hire an associate in 2019. So after 1 year of ownership, I did hire an associate, and we expanded to both of those offices being full-time offices. So they grew to 4 days a week at each location. And kind of went on that path for a while. And then in 2021, I believe it was, I got a cold call from someone who owned a practice in a small town kind of in the area of the other offices, just wanting to sell the office. And from there, we leapt in and bought the 3rd office. Had to kind of change our infrastructure quite a bit at that point. I did have an office manager, and so we had to increase her role to being a regional manager. Had to hire additional associates, and I guess the team members did come in that transaction. So we didn't have to find any more assistants and hygienists, but did have to find doctor. And went along that, and good and bad with it, which I'm sure we'll kind of get into that. But I ultimately made the difficult decision in early 2024 to offload 2 of the practices and just keep the 1 in my hometown of Williamsburg. And so, yeah, that was a lot of stuff going into that, and the struggles of initially trying to sell it, and then I guess foreshadowing, I had to make a even more difficult decision, which we'll reveal that, I guess, later.
Well, and this is why I really wanted to have you on. You and I have been together since, I believe, 2020. And yes, I remember going from 2 to 3 and then back down to 1 was obviously a huge decision. And I think this is an important conversation because you and I have talked about how even practice ownership itself, even just owning 1 practice, it can sometimes be enticing and you jump in without knowing what you're getting into. It's kind of sold as this really beautiful thing, but it's not necessarily best if you're not, really called to it. and then let alone multi-practice. And I think, there's a lot of folks who are interested in multi-practice, and for good reason. And it's certainly the right choice for some. But I also think solo and kind of landing on that productive solo avatar can be a beautiful thing. And you're very unique in that you've been through multiple different avatars of ours and back, and you've kind of landed in, I think, a sweet spot for you. So, we talk so much about setting your vision on this podcast, and we talk so much about how the coaching we do is really anchored in our client's vision, and you set the tone. And so for you, you've changed yours a few times on me and back, and I love that because we've kind of tried it all out. And I think where you are now, you feel like settled, and you've tried it, and you know what works for you. So I think it's cool to have someone like you on who's done it, seen it, and has decided to figure out what's best, and maybe it's not always biggest is better. So let's go back to where we last left off. Last time we had you on, and we were in the infrastructure of 3 practices. We had a regional manager, you had 2 associates. What was good about multi-practice? Looking back, was there anything in particular you enjoyed about it?
I did not love much about multi-practice. I'm just not the personality that it's suited for. I think you have to be very detail oriented. You have to be very comfortable managing people, and managing multiple personalities. So that's just not me. I'm very like lax, and I like to be as hands off as like one reasonably can be. And I don't think that's how you run 3 practices efficiently. But as I was preparing for this call, I was thinking back, and I was like, okay, it wasn't all doom and gloom. There were definitely pros and cons. And I think overall, I learned a lot of lessons, a lot of hard lessons, but that's part of growth, is going through that process. So even though my experience wasn't great, I am very thankful for the experience. I'm thankful for the people I met. One of my assistants that I have now was a connection through someone that was at one of the other offices. So I might have never met her without that. One of my hygienists, one of her really good friends, was a hygienist at the other, or has become a good friend of hers. And it's like they may have never had that friendship without the experience. So, the process itself I didn't love, just because I realized I don't love managing a big group of people, and I like to do things my way. And I really struggled with, especially managing doctors. I really struggled with. Part of that's maybe because one of my associates was older than me and technically a more experienced dentist in terms of years practicing. So it's hard to mentor someone and tell them how you want something done if they disagree. Just managing people is not my thing.
Well, and to those listening, some might say, okay, well, in a multi-practice setting, I can hire a fantastic regional manager and have office managers or team leads at these locations, and I really only have to manage a small crew of folks, and they can do the rest of the managing for me, which can be true. I think the tricky part for you was, making sure that you could communicate effectively how you wanted the tone and how you wanted leadership to be in each location, and the consistency of that. And so a leader like you, I think, does better when you're in person with the same people every day, and you can kind of lead by example. But it was challenging for you to communicate your vision to the leaders in your practice, including the associates, because naturally they're the dentists there and you're not there. And so there is a natural leadership component. And so, conveying your tone, your style, making sure the culture is what you want, the accountability is what you want. It was hard for you, I think, to get those words out and express to them on a consistent basis, and then hold them accountable if it wasn't what you wanted. And I remember you saying to me, I do not want an associate. I'm done managing associates. And in that moment, I go, okay, we're done with multi-practice. We're not even going group. We are in productive solo, like nail in the coffin. I love that moment of clarity that I think we both had. And I think it's fair. I do want to point out geography here too. Like, what role do you think trying to do multi-practice in a rural setting in Iowa played? And do you think your experience would have been different if you were closer to the city?
I definitely feel like recruiting was difficult. And we even found that when we tried selling the offices. Like there's just not a lot of people want to come to rural Iowa. So recruiting was hard, and anyone we did either recruit as an associate or even just like got in touch with and discussed, they kind of see rural practices as a stepping stone until they can find an opportunity in a city or get enough money to buy their own practice, um, which is great and which is fine. But it felt like a revolving door. Like you could never like let the anxiety down because you got one position figured out and then you had to try and fill another one as soon as that went in. And you know, partly that is the location. Maybe partly that was me as a leader too. Looking back, that staff retention, obviously
Sure.
I'm not blameless, but yeah, I would definitely say that was part of it. And just the demographic of our patients, and maybe patients in a city are like this too, but like they are not comfortable seeing a different practitioner
Mm,
every time. And they would just get really bothered when they would see a different dentist, or I mean, it's even to the point where if they see a different hygienist, they don't really enjoy that either. And so that was hard from a patient perspective to like, they just didn't understand why they're not seeing the same person.
right.
It's just small town dentistry is different, where
Yeah.
there's usually only one dentist there and they don't understand associates and things like that.
Well, and I do think the recruiting was a challenge. And to your point, we have to have self accountability for leadership and team retention. What I would add though is it was not as though you had 5 candidates for each position that you got to really be thorough and select the best person. It was kind of slim choices in the
Mhm.
application process, whether we're talking about an associate or a hygienist or any position, really.
Anything, yes.
Yeah, to find the balance of experienced and the right culture fit was always a challenge. And so, when you're settling in the hiring process, it's going to be more challenging in the retention and accountability aspect once they're
Mhm.
actually an employee. And just from my opinion, kind of watching you go through it, I still think you would have landed in this place of enjoying being a productive solo. And that's still true to you. However, I think the minimal doctor candidates and really just kind of having to take what we could get and trying to make it work with dentists who maybe weren't always aligned, like you had mentioned, whether it was clinically or culturally, but still kind of having to make it work because you're
Mhm.
kind of out there and there's not a ton of dentists knocking down your door. I think you might have had a different experience if you were just anywhere that had slightly more candidates for you and therefore
Mhm.
you could be a little bit more selective about, the associate profile and having it align with you.
Mhm.
And potentially the small town patients kind of responding if you had been able to hand select dentists that felt the same and kind of had this
Yeah.
vibe too. So yeah, I agree with that aspect as well. Okay. So kind of talk us through the tipping point here. I can remember getting an email from you of just kind of like, hey, I've been thinking all night long, crunching numbers. How could I get myself out of this situation? Talk us through the tip of the iceberg and just this transition.
I'm chuckling because I remember writing that email like in my bathtub in tears. I was like taking a
I
bubble
love
bath,
it.
probably
I
like
love it.
drinking a glass of wine, but
Yeah.
like just like panicked.
Right.
Um, there's a lot. So I mean, there was definitely just a lot of breakdown, not with one particular person, but just as the culture was just, I don't want to use the word toxic, but like degrading. It just, things were just falling apart and like no one was all on the same page. And um, I know we talked earlier, I had a regional manager and it would just wasn't working out.
Sure.
um, there were interpersonal relationship, friendships kind of crossing the like being friends with people that maybe we shouldn't be. And I don't think that my regional manager saw my vision. And it's hard when you don't agree with the leader to implement what the leader wants. And so I I think the team felt that she didn't believe in the direction I wanted to go. And so it was kind of a breakdown between team and me. And there wasn't really anything kind of bringing it together. So, anyways, that was kind of happening. And we had an associate, one of our associates told me he was leaving. So we were in the midst of trying to recruit, which, as aforementioned, very stressful, very difficult to recruit associates. So there was that going on. And then, honestly, just financially, the practices weren't really profitable. Um, it was tough because people would see, people as in the team, would be looking at like the monthly reports, and the regional manager even looking at the monthly reports, and you see like, oh, as a collective, we're collecting $3 million or whatever it is. But just with having multiple doctors, all the staff, 3 mortgages on the buildings, there wasn't really any profit left. And so it kind of got to a point where things weren't improving with continued coaching between Caitlin and myself, and then me trying to bring that coaching to the team and the other associates and the other team members. Things just weren't progressing, but I wasn't able to pay. I didn't take a paycheck for, I don't even know how long. I don't know if you remember, Caitlin, 6 months maybe. I can't remember. And so that was difficult. And it just kind of got to a point where it's like, we can't sustain this anymore. And so
Yeah.
I initially tried listing the practices with a broker. Didn't really get a lot of bites. I mean, partially, one, the numbers weren't great. The broker tried to, make them look as appealing as one can, but that wasn't great. It wasn't appealing to someone to buy it as like a multiple office, just because associate retention they saw was difficult. So it had been listed for a couple of months, no reasonable offers. So I wrote this manic email. I probably CC'd Suzanne too.
I
I'm
think
not
so.
sure. And I just, from my bathtub, I'm like, okay, what would happen if I just closed the offices? I was like, okay, well,
And to
here's my
clarify, 2, we're closing 2
2
out of
of them.
3.
Yes,
Yeah,
close
yeah,
2 of the 3. I wanted to keep the one in my hometown.
yeah.
Um, I'm like, what would happen if I just closed them? Because here's my loan amounts, my mortgage amounts. Here's what I personally produce. So, do these numbers make sense? As
Yeah.
I'm looking at them, they make sense. So I'm like, I need another set of eyes. And I had told my husband, it's like, I am strongly considering just shutting down 2 offices. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't know what else to do. And then I sent it on with his kind of approval to them to kind of get a second set of eyes. And then I sent it to my accountant, and we were all kind of like, yeah, this is nuts, but I think it's better than what is currently going on.
It's exactly. I think ultimately it was a business decision, right? And it wasn't like you were necessarily underwater, but it just you were kind of breaking even, or it just wasn't sustainable if we weren't going to see the progress soon.
Mm-hmm.
And it I think ultimately wasn't on your heart either. Like, kind of looking back, I don't know if even the third practice was truly what you wanted, or if it was more of a group decision and you went along with it because it sounded
Mm-hmm.
exciting too.
Yeah, definitely. And, I was graduating in the era of multi-practice. It was like the sexy thing. I know that gets brought up all the time on the podcast and
Yeah.
others that, like 2018 was like peak of like multi-practice ownership,
Okay.
like when I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
coming out of school. Like I remember when I graduated dental school and would go to like conferences or CE or anything, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I own 2 practices at the time, 2 practices. And people would be like, "Oh my goodness, that is so impressive." And I was like, "Yes,
Mhm.
please stroke my
Mhm.
ego. Yes, I am
Mhm.
impressive." Less people tell me I'm impressive now with 1 office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Even though
so
you look
like,
at your profit margins now and you go,
yes,
"This is the way to do business."
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it was just like, it was what on paper was the successful thing to do. That's what all great business women did, is they
Yeah.
had multiple offices. But yes, when we looked into the third office, it wasn't particularly exciting to me. I mean, I didn't seek them out. It was a cold call that came to me. But My regional manager was super excited about it. One of my associates was like super excited
Right.
about it, and I just kind of like rode that excitement. It's like
Mhm.
having a kid. If you have two, what's a
Mhm.
third?
Well, and that was our big joke because you were having a
Yeah.
third baby and a third
Yes.
practice, and it's
Yes.
it was funny, but ultimately it just got to be too much, and, yeah, I remember talking through it with you and looking at the spreadsheet and crunching the numbers together and just kind of going, is there really a dollar amount that can change this? And if the answer is no, and you are going to be happier as a productive solo, I mean, Williamsburg was always your baby, always your home
Mhm.
base. That team was really cohesive with you. The practice always did well when you were there and present. And so, with the accountant and with me and Suzanne, we all looked at it and we go, yeah, we can do this. And so for anyone listening, and thinking about what could this look like, or just kind of curious, let's kind of talk through how we did it. Because I remember one of the things that we did with Suzanne's help was for the practice that you had initially purchased, the second location that went along with your first in the initial transition. Um, we treated that as a merger, is how we announced that to the
Yes.
patients, if you remember. So talk through that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess to give context, we were originally going to call it a merger with both of the offices.
Mhm.
Um, but after actually, I think what had happened is we announced the merger to the team, of course, and then to the patients. Word got out, obviously, as it does, and then we got a random offer to buy one of the practices.
And this is the
Um,
third location that
this
you
is
had
the
bought
third
separately down
location.
the road. Yep.
Yes. And so that, was kind of going on in the background. So because of like non-disclosures, I couldn't tell anyone that that wasn't going to be a merger, but um, patients at first assumed that they would be getting merged. But yes, so practice number 3 was having an offer written and going through all that stuff. So then practice 2,
Yep.
um, we just let all the patients know, like, hey, like we're merging everyone to our Williamsburg location. Really, I wrote a very personal letter to all the
Mhm.
patients, just explaining, and everyone who had seen me as a practitioner knew I had 3 very young kids, very involved kids, and I just wasn't present at home, and it was getting to the point where I didn't see my kids in the morning because my husband had to take them to school, and then by the time I got off of work and made the drive back home, I sometimes wasn't seeing them that night either. And so that's really the tone I gave the patients was like, I still would love to have you as a patient. I have loved caring for you and your family. I hope that you'll
Make
make
the
the merge
drive.
with us.
Yep.
Yep.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's the tone of the letter that went out. And then the real estate we had sold that, but didn't sell any patients to practice number 2.
Mhm. Mhm. And so that's where you left it, was essentially you sold the real estate, the practice merged into location 1. And how many patients would you say did ended up deciding to come over?
I could not tell you. Maybe you know the answer, but it felt like a majority at least gave us a try on one visit,
Okay.
making
Okay.
the drive. So I don't know. Were there maybe 1,000 or a little less patients at that office?
Yeah, of
Um,
the total, yeah, and, we'd have to ask, one of your leads at this
yeah,
location if she has the official spreadsheet, because I think we did
yeah,
track it. I definitely don't think it was all. I think it was 200, 300 that maybe came over. Am I
yeah.
lowballing
It
it?
stayed. It's
Okay.
it's hard to say.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say because we were in a unique position because there's only one other office in that town, and they're a part-time office, only there 2 days a week, and they're a true fee-for-service office, not just out of network, fee-for-service where the patient has to submit their own claims.
Mhm.
So a lot of our patients who still had insurance, whether or not we were out of network with their insurance, still chose to come to us just because they would have to drive the same amount of miles to find another office. They knew us and they didn't want to have to deal with billing their own insurance.
Mhm.
So we had a decent retention, and we still, I mean, every month someone who fell off all of a sudden has a problem, and then gets reeled back in because we
Yeah.
kept the phone number. So
Right. Oh, there
they'll
you go.
call. They might think they're calling office number 2 because maybe whatever reason they forgot we merged or closed, and
Hmm.
we get them back.
Smart. So you were able to kind of recapture and redirect them to your first location. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you tried with a broker to sell the third, got no bites, thought you were going to have to do the same thing. But then once you made the decision and the announcement, word got out of,
Yes.
oh, like I might as well try and get this practice. And so that ended
Yes.
up being fortunate that you did ultimately get a buyer.
Mhm.
How did that sale go?
I mean, it was fine. In terms of like the negotiations, there wasn't too much negotiating. I mean, I didn't have a ton of negotiating power because it was basically a dying practice and
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
getting shut down. Um, so it it went as well as I guess it could. This is my first time being on the end of a seller. Of course, some things happen at the end of the day where buyer maybe thought they were getting something or weren't getting something or a contract, but nothing too
Nothing
crazy, I
crazy.
guess.
And
Yeah.
the benefit there, let's talk about team for a little bit. So for that third location, the team just simply got to choose if they wanted to stay on. And it was just kind of a normal transition where there's going to be a new owner and you work that out with them in terms of, that employee
Yep.
relationship. And then, with those employees who are at your second location, obviously there's an emotional aspect to this. There's a people component. So talk us through kind of how you did right by them and took care of them. Because I remember you were very transparent and gave them notice and really walked them through how it was going to work, and just did your best to support them. And I think that could be a big component of someone making that decision to close an office if they don't find a buyer. Like, how do you take care of your team in a tough situation like that?
Yeah, it was definitely hard. I remember bringing them all together. So the office I kept, and the team there, they were told ahead of time that, hey, like this is what's going on. I'm telling the rest of the team tomorrow when I work with them. So please, keep discreet. But everyone who was keeping a position knew ahead of time. And then I went to work at office number 2, and most of the team was there. So we were in a kind of a position where there were team members like traveling between locations. So I had most of the team members of offices 2 and 3, minus maybe 1 or 2 people weren't on site with me that day. So I just sent out a text and said, hey, I just have a quick announcement for you guys. Can I FaceTime you at whatever time? And the rumors were swirling. No one knew I was selling the offices, but there had been
Talk.
like I'm sure they could see the writing on the wall. I'm sure I was just like a stressed person walking around. So
Right.
anyways, so I'm sure they all were expecting the announcement that the office has been sold. But I had to tell them, what I just said. I'm not spending any time with my kids. And I unfortunately had to make the difficult decision to shut down 2 of the locations and just merge our patients to Williamsburg. And that, unfortunately, they wouldn't be a part of the transition.
Right.
I did give I want to say it was over a month's notice.
It was.
Yeah, we had the date set as the merge is going to happen on May 1st, and this was probably mid-March. It was probably 6 weeks notice. I want to say,
And this was May 1st, 2024, just for clarity,
2024. Yeah.
that we're over a year out from this now. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so I told them, like, you have a job until May 1st. If you happen to find something before then, like, don't feel like you need to stay on for my benefit. Like, do what you need to do for yourself to find a new position. But yeah, I just gave them 6 weeks notice of basically kind of what was going on. So
And I remember too, because you are well connected in the area, and I think you were able to write some letters of recommendation and find some positions for some of your team too.
yeah, a classmate of mine in a nearby town had heard, the rumors made it to him,
Hmm.
and he had just done a startup. So he was looking for some team members. So I gave his contact information to some of the girls who were looking. I can't remember if it worked out for them or not, but I think a couple of them at least had interviews with him. So I tried to connect where I could. And yeah, I was definitely willing to write letters of recommendation. I actually think I wrote a letter of recommendation for everyone and handed it to them the day I told them.
I think you did too. Yeah. These are just the things that you can do in a hard moment, and it's some of it's out of your control, but these are ways to still show up for them and make it clear that it's not personal and it's not a reflection of them. So I just kind of wanted to talk through that, like kind of how we had those hard transitional conversations. So do you remember how you felt just, after it was all out there? What were the mixed emotions, I'm sure?
Yeah, so it was definitely hard going into it. Just, these are humans on the other side of it. These are people and, people that you care about. And so it was definitely difficult and I felt a lot of guilt. But honestly, it was a huge, huge relief. And seeing the team, I mean, even it was an interesting position to be in, like stepping back and looking, because at the time it was a merger for everything. And so there were these people who knew that they weren't going to have a job in 6 weeks, and yet they were working, calling patients to move them over to the new office. So that was, in the moment, it was just work, and like we just got a lot of stuff to get done. But like I step back and I think about it and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm sure that was like super difficult for them. But yeah, there was definitely guilt, and there was like fear of judgment. Am I a failure? What are people gonna think? Yeah, but the more removed I am from the situation, it's just it's been nothing but the right decision. I've never once questioned it since I've done it. And so I guess that's how it was the right decision. That no
Yes.
regrets about it.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you because I think we all have, I mean, to a certain degree, we care about how we're perceived, especially professionally, and especially if you're a really well esteemed dentist, you've worked really hard. And so you were mentioning the rumors flying, how did that affect you and kind of thinking about your colleagues and your peers? Feeling like a failure to them. And I mean, ultimately, I think it was worth it to you, but was that a challenge?
It was. I mean, I had confided in a lot of friends that, were friends who were also colleagues. So they knew the issues I was going through and the struggles I was going through and kind of all that. So people who knew me, I wasn't too afraid of that. I guess I didn't really think too much about like other colleagues. Some of the specialists that we would refer to were kind of like, so what happened? Just confused. Which, maybe hindsight, if anyone's listening to this and is thinking about doing that, like maybe like
Let them know.
specialists.
Yeah.
And I think after I got a couple like reports back or like questions from specialists, I'm like, I should probably let them know. So I think we sent like a letter later, but that was an afterthought. But yeah, I guess at the end I did have a couple like strained relationship with team members. And so I don't know if I worried about like what they thought of me. I guess yes and no. Like, of course you don't want people like hating on you or like thinking that you got what you deserved. I don't know. Like, I think like maybe like outside people who don't know the situation thought like, oh, she failed and she got what I don't want to say got what she deserved, but like might see what happened as a failure. And I'm like, I don't care because I ultimately think it was like a huge win.
Yeah. Good for you.
It was hard to get there. I mean, I didn't love the process, but I'm grateful for the process, if that makes sense.
You walked through fire, you came out the other side, and we're going to talk about the other side here in a minute. One of the things I remember and that I noticed about your development as a professional, as a business owner, as a leader, just as a person, in the beginning of our coaching relationship, you were very afraid of upsetting people. You did not like confrontational conversations. You wanted to be the good guy, and it was a lot of me kind of coaching you on verbiage of how to push back a little bit, how to stand your ground,
Mhm.
and um, that's still naturally who you are, but at the
Yes.
same time that experience hardened you in some ways, and sometimes that can be a good thing, especially in business. And I'll never forget you forwarded me an email. You're going back and forth with a team member, a high level team member, and talking about contract and talking about the end of the contract. And they kind of thought they were owed something that technically they were not. And you didn't even ask me how to respond. You just told me about it after the fact, and you wrote, "Here's my lawyer's contact information. Let him know if you have an
Yeah.
issue with this. I won't be accommodating that request."
Yeah.
And that was the end of it. And I just remember that response going, "Wow, the growth you've had." And you'll carry that with you for the rest of your career, of just that fearlessness a little bit too, and I think you learned some really challenging but important lessons, and you came out the other side, yeah, tougher, stronger, and you learned so much about business operations, about transitions, what's legal, what's fair, real estate, and you'll carry
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, definitely. I think my skin got a lot thicker from
Hmm.
the process because it's
Absolutely.
like, yeah, I mean, of course, you always still care what people think of you, but at some point, you have to be like, this is
Yep.
like life for myself. I'm not living to
Yep.
make you happy. Like, you should always
Yes.
be a good person. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. I'm not saying being a terror, but yeah, like you
Mhm.
can't live for other people.
No, and when you put your license on the line and your life on the line to run a business, like if anyone's going to be happy, it should be you. And so I just really commended you for recognizing that this wasn't going to progress. And even if it did get better, it's not really what you wanted anyway, to have this
Mhm.
booming multi-practice empire. So it was tough, but we got out. And so you officially went to the productive solo at Williamsburg. And we had a strong patient base. We had a strong running production collections. It was a well-established practice. We had you rotating there. You kind of rotated through all the practices. So the doctor's schedule was kind of crazy for a while, but you always had a presence there. And so we were
Mhm.
shifting back to you being there. It's a 4-op practice. You were there 4 days a week. You still are. And so that was May of 2024. And so now here we are, a year and a half later. And I can speak to the metrics and just say, I mean, this practice is firing on all cylinders in terms of what you would want the productive solo to look like. The patient base, we're still kind of working on building up a little bit, but we're close to 1,600 active
Mhm.
patients, and we're collecting what we want to be for the most part. And so it's really just kind of maintenance and then growth kind of within this space. So talk to us about how this last year and a half has been, team dynamics, how it's felt to you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, it's honestly like knock on wood, like it's felt easy. I mean, and that's not to say there haven't been
Sure.
struggles or like little things, but honestly, it's a well-oiled machine. The team members have all been there, for a long time. Um, so we all work well together. We all have like a good working relationship with one another. So that's been good. And the patients have responded really well. I honestly, now that we're a year and a half after this transition, I think the patients have really responded very positively about like every exam, it's going to be with me. Like
Yes. Yeah.
there's no question about
Simplicity.
who you're going to see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's that, and it's nice that any outcomes, either positive or negative in patient care, like it's on me, and I enjoy that. That was a thing that I struggled with, was just balancing, sharing work with other providers. Because if a patient had something happen and then they were put on my schedule, or I did work and then it got put on another doctor's schedule, I didn't like that. So, yeah, it's been good. I don't have to like wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat and like check the bank account. Like I can
Yeah.
run payroll and I know it's gonna go
Yeah.
through.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's been good. I mean, there's always room for growth, like to your point, and we've made some of those changes. We dropped an insurance
Mhm.
this year, and so now we're only a network with one more insurance, and eventually, I don't know when, but eventually we would like to go completely out of network with the one last living insurance. So that's that's on the
Can
radar.
anybody guess what the looming insurance is?
It's the big one. Yeah, it's the big
The
one.
big one.
The big one.
Yeah, yeah. So,
But
well,
yeah.
that's exactly what was going to be my next question because you still have the entrepreneurial spirit. You still have the hunger for growth. That doesn't go away. So, how does somebody still grow the practice and still evolve when they've decided to kind of stay in that productive solo situation? You just hit on one of them, which is increasing the efficiency per patient by eventually going completely out of network. And so just dropping one of those two has allowed us to see that increase and just we're more productive per patient. And it was really cool. You were able to show the team like after the first quarter, full quarter after that, we were able to show that our net production remained the same,
Mhm,
because the adjustments were not as high, even though gross production was slightly lower. So that was
mhm.
cool. Um, and the other thing you get to focus on is just clinical skill set and what you want to add to the practice. So how do you stay entertained by this? How do you stay excited to go to work?
I really like the people and like the slowing down. So, it's actually been quite enjoyable to spend time with like patients, and that
Mhm.
also is a result of, um, kind of getting out of the insurance dependence, as you can spend more
Yes.
time with your patients, and you're not like rushing through like a mill. But
Mhm.
so I've enjoyed that part of it. I'm really trying to do more ortho cases. It's kind of like my weak point. I don't. It's You can probably tell I'm kind of a passive person, so I just don't like feeling like a salesman. So I'm trying to
Mhm.
like learn how to um, see it myself and present it as like this is something that's really going to benefit you. It's not just padding my pocket. It's something that is going to help you down the road. So I'm really working on that. But um, just building a really family friendly schedule has been fun for me too. I love to tinker with things.
Mhm.
uh, and so we recently changed our schedule a couple months ago now. I guess it was only in October. So yeah, it was a couple months. So um, that's been, I mean, it's always hard to have a change, but yeah.
Well, tell us what you mean by that, because I remember this is kind of the benefit of having a small team who's been with you a long time. All of you decided, oh, this would be better
Yes.
for all of us for the most part. So, what change did you all decide to make?
Yes. So first of all, it's probably not good leadership to like have your team take a vote.
Yeah.
You probably just tell them what you're doing. But in the spirit of like being passive, I'm like,
What
guys,
do you guys think? Yeah.
let's think about changing
Yeah.
our hours. What do you think? Anyways, I presented this to them and we voted unanimously. Anyway, so we were previously a 7 a.m. to um 4 p.m. on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then we did 7 to 6 on Thursdays. That was a lot. And then we did 7 to 2 on Fridays. So we shifted to ending our days at 3 on Mondays and Wednesdays and just not having a lunch. Which, if you're thinking about that, check your labor laws. But in Iowa, it is allowed to work through lunch, but other
Mhm.
states are not. So keep that in mind.
Contact HR for help.
Yeah. Yes. So think about that before you go willy-nilly. I did look into that. But so we just work the same amount of hours, but we get out an hour earlier. We all, not all, but most of us have young kids. So to be able to get to their activities or pick them up from school, like that's been super helpful. And then we cut our 6 o'clock appointment and now end our day at 5 instead of at 6 on Thursdays on our long day. So
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
How have patients responded?
It's interesting because the people who are, I need that 5 o'clock appointment, it's amazing how all of a sudden they can just find a time in the middle of the
Right.
day.
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, our 4 o'clock appointment, so our 4 to 5 slot, it's our latest slot, that is booked out until like July or August.
Sure.
But I think that's going to help with training our patients to respect that time too, because if they cancel it, they're not going to be able to get back in for
Exactly.
7 or 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
Also, our 7 a.m.s are super busy. Those are really booked out, I think, until like March or April, unless a last minute one comes up. But yeah.
But patients are being trained to honor those and to know that those are very valuable appointment slots. And so it motivates them to reappoint ahead of time and to keep it. So I think that's great. Yeah, I can just speak as your coach and kind of watching this transition happen, just the breath of fresh air that I see. And it's made me take a huge sigh of relief as well when all of this finally happened, because I knew that the numbers were going to turn around for you. I had no doubts that you, just kind of going back to the 4 days at Williamsburg, I knew you were going to be able to do that really well, and just have influence there with a team of people who really support you and have been very loyal to you. And yeah, you've really made it happen, and it's simple and it's sustainable and it's profitable. And
Mhm.
that's why I love the productive solo model, and I think it's just cool to say, like, this is what I want, and less is more sometimes, and this is going to work for me long term, and hopefully keep you excited to be a dental business owner for the rest of your career, and have it be sustainable for you. And you're not like desperate to get out,
You're
down
right.
the road. So I'm just super proud of you for this huge transition that you've accomplished, and not being afraid to, you know, be perceived as a failure, be perceived anyway, and just kind of get what you want anyway and go through the hard times. And look where you landed. So, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this has been a really important conversation for our audience to hear. And I just think it's cool, in the spirit of, I think multi-practice is still very exciting for a lot of folks. And I want to make it clear that I think it can be done really well. And a lot of multi-practice owners can be very happy and fulfilled with that. But I think it's important to see the other side and have this conversation too. So I really appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to come on and chat with me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I agree. I don't want anyone leaving this conversation thinking that multi-practice is the worst thing ever. It just wasn't the right thing for me. And I think bigger point here is you just really need to think about your vision and what you want out of practice ownership or out of dentistry. Maybe not being an owner entirely is part of your vision. And just really sit with that and see what you think your ideal life looks like, and build it from there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Shared Practices podcast. Any questions for me following this episode, you can email me at Caitlin@sharedpractices.com. Thanks, everyone.